Chapter 12. Millie crunched into an apple. So she didn't want to go to the snowball, but she'll meet us at the Silver Smoke instead? Pretty much, Gil said. They were exploring Grant, which was congested with students in scarves and coats. Exams were wrapping up, in a week of no classes before the snowball was fast approaching. The imminence of freedom ensured everyone was in high spirits, unwinding over cider and music. There would be shows on the green. He could peruse the egg at his leisure. He would have time to relax, maybe write a letter to his parents. He thought guiltily of Rhea, who was probably writing to her parents right now. Maybe they would change their mind and let her go to the snowball. He wondered what her parents were like. The food and music and dancing would be amazing. The morning was cool, nearly cold, and Gil knew the first snowfall was approaching, percolating somewhere in the gray sky. I just don't understand her, Millie said. Why would she avoid the snowball? It's the highlight of the whole term. Gil had also wondered why Rhea's parents wanted her to avoid the dance. He decided to change tact. You and Hammond are going as friends, right? Millie grinned. Of course. I only like one boy, and he's not much of a dancer. Ash chose that moment to bark at a merchant selling sausage skewers, and they laughed. The streets were flush with penny plays and puppeteers, bards and storytellers. It seemed every entertainer from the nearby towns had journeyed to Grant, drawn by the jubilant students. They knew generosity followed merriment. The tailors were in full swing as well. The well-established tailors owned shops with gleaming glass and leather sitting chairs. They bustled about inside, all elbows and knees, measuring students, pinning sleeves, hemming dresses. The more enthusiastic, less reputable tailors set up shop on a bare stretch of street. A spindly-armed tailor with a wispy beard caught Gil's eye and grinned eagerly. Feeling drab, come to Brab. I'll fix that cloak in a snab. He trailed off, then looked up with a toothy smile. I'll do a good job, anyway. Gil was saved an answer as another student flagged the eager tailor, who set to work needling and poking at a tear in the boy's cloak. Along the street, other tailors sewed patches over torn pants, replaced buttons for a coin or two. Businesses boomed in the streets and stores. Students with coin to spare bought new finery for the snowball. Others patched up whatever they had. Shines and fittings, a cobbler called through her shop door. A student bought a gleaming pair of boots from her, black as a cave lake. The next stepped forward, and the shopkeeper beamed. New slippers for the dance. I must say, a pale blue would accent your eyes so... Millie pulled Gil forward, toward a penny play, boasting a nice crowd. The players wore dramatic, furred robes of an older age, and they moved around a soup pot. Within a few lines, Gil recognized the Heart-Scale tale. He enjoyed watching the familiar story unfold. It matched the odes and poems he'd discovered at Hazeltop. A brilliant alchemist and her dying husband, her quest for the cure. But then the story broke from his parents' vision, and Gil watched as the player sobbed over her husband's final moments. The story always ended this way at Hazeltop, but why? When his mother told the story, the husband always lived. Had she simply been sparing him from the truth? He did not clap with the others as the actors made their final bows. They moved on and bought bread and cinnamon butter from the Drake Finn Inn. The bread was warm and light, sweet with butter. Millie ordered sausages for Ash, whose tail danced as she lowered the plate to him. Pleasantly full, Gil finally felt the tension of the exams fading. All in all, they had gone pretty well. He hadn't died in cauldroneering for starters. Herblore had been quite easy. The master of Herblore, or Old Ham, as the class eventually named him, had ordered them into the thicket to find an impossible scattering of plants, most of which were not in season or did not grow there. They were then supposed to combine the plants to make a delicious soup. After a half hour of fruitless searching, students decided to venture to the cellars of the flask. The pickings were easier there, and they returned before long with a sack of vegetables, herbs, and a pot. Ham gummed up the soup eagerly and pronounced, "Good as nemmies, this is." Gil still sported several bruises from the defense exam, which had involved a dozen mountainous dogs, with a stick tied across their backs. The dogs had raced around, excited to go from one student to the next. In the process, they invariably clipped someone with their lance, a dozen overeager jousting dogs racing around the arena. He had very much enjoyed watching students run and dodge the dogs in the previous class. It had been less fun when he was being scrambled like an egg in a bowl. Stranger still was Wondercraft. Gil had been at the Silver Smoke again with Hammond and Millie one evening. They were sitting on the hillside rather than the beach. They had rarely returned to the shore since the Drake attack. As they made to leave, Gil recognized the master walking the beach. Loris looked up and approached Gil. Might I have a few minutes? For most masters, Gil knew there was only one answer to this question. With Loris, though, the question was genuine. So too was Gil's curiosity, and he waved Hammond and Millie on. Of course. Walk with me, Loris asked. He led them back toward the lake, which was a sheet of broiling gold in the sunset. As Gil's feet met the sand, he couldn't stop a flood of fear from washing through him. It was freezing his limbs, slowing his walk to a shuffle, then to a dumb halt. Loris's face was kind. What do you fear? The golden lake shimmered. Something could be lurking beneath any one of those ripples, waiting for him. Drakes, dragons. No, the master said gently, and he knelt at the water's edge. He struck the water, once, twice, with an open palm. His hand cracked against the water, 4 sharp beats. He continued, and it began to sound like a drum. More than that, it was the cadence of the hartscale tale. Water splashed Loris's robes, but he didn't seem to mind. In fact, his eyes were dancing. The wise have many uses for fear. He struck the lake once more, the final beat of the chorus. Silence fell. The master was now soaked and grinning widely. Gil wondered if he'd lost his wits. Then there was a flash of silver beneath the golden lake. A fin broke the surface, and a drake glided forward hesitantly. Its head lifted above the water and found Loris. In a flash, the drake hurtled toward the master. Water sprayed wildly as fins and tail thrashed, eyes locked on Loris. Gil tried to move, to help, but his feet were rooted. He watched, terrified, as the drake leapt from the water and crashed into Loris. There was a grunt, and then a great, rolling laugh. Oh, Nuzzy, it's good to see you, too. Gil realized his eyes were squeezed close. He opened them. Loris was sprawled in the sand, laughing merrily. The drake was trying to wriggle under his arm, but it was much too large. It flopped onto its back beside Loris, webbed fins stretching wide. The long tail floated in the shallows, and it flicked water onto Loris. All right, he said, pushing himself to his feet and scratching along the drake's neck. It sighed and snorted a little puff of smoke. Loris looked up, smiling. This is Nuzzy. I've known her quite a long time. I think she'd like to meet you. Millie flicked his arm. Are you even listening? I just heard Hammond outside, didn't you? What? Gil shook himself, and the memory of the lake tumbled away. He was sitting in the Drakefin Inn. Look, there's Hammond, Millie said. Gil turned and looked out the window. I thought he was going to the egg this morning to work on his last essay. Must have finished early. Let's go say hi. They left the warmth of the inn and wove around wagons looking for Hammond. The nearby ludist trailed off as a dozen squires sauntered by, hands on practice swords. One of them shouldered Gil, nearly knocking him down. Tricks and potions didn't help you there, did they? The squire jeered. Next semester, sign up to be a practice dummy. His friends laughed, and they shoved through some startled enchanting students toward a tavern. Criminy, are you okay, Gil? That boy's been used as a practice post, I'd say. Didn't his head look a little dented? Gil smiled and shook some feeling back into his shoulder. Wasn't very happy with me. Probably just jealous. I bet he applied for alchemy and melted the cauldron in his entrance exam or something. The squires slammed the tavern door shut. People started and turned toward the noise. As they turned, Gil saw the figure. It wore a ragged, tawny cloak and passed through the distracted crowd like a leaf through a forest. A hand slipped from the cloak and pinched a few coins from the jar of a shoe shiner. Next were the penny players and a merchant's cart. In 5 seconds' distraction, the figure had lifted coin from a half-dozen players. As the hand returned to the cloak, Gil saw the dark gleam of coppers. He frowned. There were silvers and even a few golds still in the jars. Had the thief missed them? The figure slipped into an alley as the crowd eased back into motion and the music returned. Gil blinked. Should he try to find a knight? Call out thief? But the thief would be long gone by the time he found a knight, and yelling would only drive the figure into hiding. There's a thief, he whispered to Millie. Her eyes were unfocused, panicked. Where? There, down that alley. Her panic turned to confusion. In the alley? You're sure? Gil was already moving forward, swiped coins and disappeared. Hurry, let's catch up. Millie and Ash followed him across the street and into the alley's mouth. It was a narrow stretch of cobblestone and would be nothing but shadows once night fell. Now, though, it was only a twisting path snaking into the depths of Gwent. They went deeper, following the alley's bend. Shops sprang up, distorted reflections of those found on the main streets. A door side closed beneath a flaking sign for dregs. Gil and Millie inched to one of the shop's grimy windows. The window was level, with a shelf of jarred liquids and floating things. Dust had collected on the murky jars, further blurring their contents. Gil was grateful. Even a normal apothecary was unsettling at times. He didn't want to imagine what this apothecary sold. Ash whined, and Gil scratched him. Beyond the jars was a doorway, and then the brown blur of a counter. Grimacing, Gil buffed the window with his sleeve until there was a waxy clarity. A hand drummed the counter, he saw, and something rolled between the fingers in a hypnotizing dance. Another hand appeared across the counter. These hands were smaller, quicker, cleverer. They fanned a row of coppers across the bar like playing cards, and the shopkeep's hand paused, gestured, and disappeared. It returned with a piglet pink flask. The other hand reached toward the flask, wavered, and took it. Coins were scooped from the table, and both hands disappeared. Gil grabbed Millie, who was staring blindly into the window. Come on, we need to go. They're coming. They hurried away and crouched behind a musty barrel just in time to see Dreg's door ease open. A shadowed face peered left, right. Seeing nobody in the alley, they pushed the door wide. Light fell on the face, a boy's face, and Gil's stomach rolled. Hammond Oatley slipped a pink bottle into his cloak and turned down the next alley, deeper into Gwent, deeper into the shadows. Gil was scrubbing. His hands were pink and wrinkled in the suds, but he hardly noticed. Why was Hammond stealing? And what had he bought? Was this why Hammond had kept vanishing? To steal from any poor sod he could? Gil doused another plate and scrubbed. Hadn't Hammond worked odd jobs all year? Where had all his coin gone? The dance is tomorrow, Master Drayborn called across the bustling kitchen. Tomorrow's lunch must be perfect. I need onions chopped, tomatoes sliced. You! He grabbed a passing cook and redirected her to a table. Begin shredding greens. The dancers need a light meal before the party. Salad and bread, mostly. Tomorrow's crew will prepare the dressing and toss the salad. Everything must be ready. The kitchen churned into motion around Gil. Busboys carried boxes of vegetables and greens from the cellar. Cooks drew knives to chop, peel, and slice. Apprentices ground spices and juiced olives in preparation for the salad dressing. Lots what it takes to make a salad, Bunt was saying beside Gil. The older man was scrubbing with the same steady motion as Gil's first day. Huh? Gil's tangled thoughts about Hammond fell apart. Bunt added a gleaming plate to the rack. Not my choice of meal for a big dance, but I ain't the cook, am I? I'd have picked something warm and stick to your ribs. Chops or meat pie. Maybe a side of beans for filling, see? Salad is a strange meal before the snowball, Gil allowed, and Bunt seized the idea. Exactly my thinkin'. Least there'll be fresh bread for you tomorrow. I'll put in a word with Colton Granks over there by the ovens, see if I can't get some honey served with the bread. I was scrubbing when he was just a chupper, you know. Might be throwing some smoked beans and Gil let Bunt's easy voice roll over him. There was something comforting in the old man's musings. Bunt had scrubbed for more than 50 years, Gil knew, and it seemed he would for another 50. He had seen so much. He probably knew more about Hazeltop than any 3 masters added up. Then again, bad year for sprouts, they say. Be better if you ask for potatoes. Sweet potatoes, maybe, or... Yes, that's perfect, Gil cut in, and Bunt looked up from his bucket in surprise. Gil had the feeling Bunt hadn't realized he was talking. Say, have you ever gone down to the sewers? Bunt cackled. Course, I used to bring the slop down every day. Not a far walk till they buried the sewer door. Gil's mind rewound to his and Ray's dash through the damp sewer. The sewer door? Where was that? Why, we're nearly standing on it. Used to be in the cellar, back by the cider barrels, before they mudded the wall, of course. Why did they seal the door? Bunt squinted into the cauldron as though the answer were swirling in the suds. Can't quite say. Might have been 10 years past, maybe 15. Mr. Drayborn had joined about that time and didn't like a smelly cellar, I expect. All those fumes in the sewer and such. Evervale, a hard voice called. A hand clamped over Gil's shoulder, nearly pulling him to his feet, and he was looking up at Master Vale. Follow me. You'll carry onions to the choppers. The master's eyes were dark and unyielding as always, but there was a flicker in them. Gil nodded. Yes, Master Drayborn. He stepped toward the cellar, but the hand fell on his shoulder once more. After me. Gil followed the master, his stomach souring. Why had Master Drayborn pulled him aside? They descended the stairs, and the kitchen's din faded to an overhead murmur. Master Drayborn led Gil around the maze of shelves, past boxed apples and barrels of potatoes. The murmur faded to a whisper, and then Gil could only hear the soft steps of the master. There was a hush as the boots slid to a stop, and the master paused, back to Gil, looking through the forest of iron shelves. Gil took a careful step back, and his hands fell and dipped into his cloak, though he could not say why. Master Drayborn drew a deep breath. You have a date tomorrow? It wasn't a question. Not exactly, Gil stammered. Explain yourself. Ray and I aren't actually going to the snowball. We'll just be at the Silver Smoke with a few friends. The master nodded to himself slowly, then more firmly. He turned, meeting Gil's eyes. I know Ray's father, as it happens, and I just received a letter from him. It seems Ray has been writing to him all term about the dance, asking for permission. Well, tell her that her fondness for this place has changed his mind. Her father would like her to attend the snowball. You will tell her this. Sure, Gil said, off balance by his sudden good fortune. I'll tell her right after my shift ends. Go now. The kitchens can survive without you. Tell her now. Gil made a quick bow. Yes, sir. Thank you, Master Drayborn. And he hurried up the stairs, nearly crashing into a weary-looking Wilkes carrying a crate of onions. Well done, Gil heard from the cellar's depths, and then he was passing the scrubbers, choppers, and cooks. The dining room was buzzing with laughter and shouts. Millie strummed and sang from the stage, adding a bass line to the ruckus. Hammond was nowhere to be seen. Had the knights caught him? Was Master Vale questioning him even now? Girls raced by, trying to hide their newly purchased skirts and dresses. A squire stood atop a table, posed with a hand on his wooden sword like a fairy tale knight. His wispy beard was dusted with sugar, and his friends were laughing at him. Millie's song ended, and Ash barked. A table of smithing students clapped and chuckled. An art student sketched a pair of enchanters barn dancing. A busboy slipped past Gil carrying 2 flagons of steaming cider. Though moonlight fell through the windows, Gil knew many students would be awake for hours, too excited by the thought of tomorrow to sleep. Once Gil saw Rhea, it was impossible to miss her in the gleeful, rosy crowd. She sat against the far wall, away from the stage in the heart of the excitement. Hers seemed to be the only downturned face in the room. He drew nearer and saw she was bent over a parchment, her veil of pale hair shielding her face. He saw a bit of discarded purple wax on the table. She must be writing a letter then, which seemed a strange thing to do in the flask. The room was infectiously happy, and he couldn't help grinning as he joined her. She looked hopelessly around the room and ended at the letter. Gil, I need to talk to you about tomorrow. His grin melted. Tomorrow? I think something terrible might happen, but I'm not sure. Why do you think? Gil asked. My parents, Rhea began and stopped. They don't want me anywhere near the snowball. I'm not sure if they want to keep me from the dance itself or something else. She looked up uncertainly. Something was troubling her, and he felt she had been carrying it for days, maybe weeks. He tried for a smile. I talked with Master Drayborn just now. He said he knew your father. Rhea stiffened, and Gil went on. He said to tell you your letters have changed his mind, and that you should go to the snowball. Relief washed over her, and a smile slipped through her worry. Changed his mind? I had hoped, but to hear it from Purius is... She trailed off before fixing Gil with a radiant smile. I'm just a little wound up from midterms yet. I think I could use some dancing tomorrow, at the snowball. She folded up the letter from her parents and bounced to her feet, watching him. Of course, Gil said, and Rhea surprised him with a quick hug. I'll need some beauty sleep, she said, and before he could argue the point, she was off and up her staircase. He sat there, combing through the day's events, wondering, thinking. He didn't notice as students left the dining room for bed, nor when Millie's music faded, nor when the last of the kitchen staff trickled out, nor did he see the tawny cloaked figure peering through the window or the glimmers running down its cheeks.